Have you ever wondered what really lurks beneath the streets of New York? We're not just talking about crowded subways or maintenance tunnels that few know about, but rather forgotten corridors, abandoned spaces, places where no light penetrates and where the city itself seems to harbor secrets that shouldn't be revealed. It was in this dark landscape that, one silent night, the NYPD received an urgent call. The station's radio rang with the tension of someone who knows that every second can change the course of an investigation. A fleeing suspect had been seen disappearing into a forgotten tunnel, part of the old underground network, located beneath an area almost erased from the urban map. Imagine for a moment the weight of that scene. The pre-dawn darkness engulfing the alleys, the distant sound of sirens echoing through the deserted avenues, and amidst it all, the news that someone dangerous had just plunged into the heart of an unstable underground. No ordinary police officer would be sent alone on such a mission. The order was clear and direct. Activate the K9 unit, one of the department's most respected branches, trained for hunting in extreme environments where sight, smell, and instinct must work together to overcome the unknown. The patrol cars arrived quickly, tires cutting through the silence of the wet street after the earlier drizzle. Their headlights illuminated the rusted entrance to the tunnel, a metal mouth that looked like a portal to another world. While some officers maintained the perimeter, others prepared the dogs. Strong animals, trained to track the impossible, sniffing out every human trace, even in adverse conditions. But that night, there was something different in the air. Those present reported that the dogs themselves, usually disciplined and focused, displayed an unusual restlessness, as if sensing that this hunt would not be like any other. Inside the unit's van, the atmosphere was one of absolute tension. Collars were adjusted, flashlights checked, radios tested. There was no room for error, and everyone knew it. The suspect couldn't simply disappear without a trace, but the big question was, what exactly awaited them down there? New York has always been full of stories about secret passages, Prohibition-era escape routes, gang hideouts, even rumors of entire communities living beneath the city. Now, however, it seemed one of those legends would take shape before the eyes of the country's most famous police force. As the agents approached the entrance, the icy wind coming from the tunnel carried a metallic, damp smell that was difficult to identify. The sounds of the city seemed to fade away, as if the concrete had the ability to swallow any noise coming from the surface. Some say that moment resembled the sensation of crossing an invisible border, the point of no return. From the outside, everything still seemed safe, but one step inside was enough for every instinct to scream danger. The public knew nothing that night. For ordinary citizens, New York was business as usual. Lights shining in Times Square, taxis cruising the avenues, bars still bustling with life. But underground, a much darker game was beginning to be played. A game in which sniffer dogs, trained police officers, and urban logic itself would be put to the test. And it was at that very moment, when the radios confirmed the formation, when the first footsteps began to echo in the abandoned hallway, that the operation began. The call from the basement had been made, and the NYPD K9 team was about to face something no training could have anticipated. Each step taken in that direction seemed to carry a weight greater than the simple act of completing a mission. It was as if the officers were crossing not only into the physical underground of the city, but also into a mental space where fear and anticipation mingled in absolute silence. And perhaps that's precisely where something essential comes in. When we hear stories like this, so full of tension and mystery, each of us feels it differently. Some are intrigued, others are chilled, some try to find rational explanations. And it's precisely this point that makes the experience even more vivid. So, before we delve deeper into this story, I'd like to invite you to share your impressions so far in the comments. What would you feel if you were in those officers' shoes? Would you trust the dog's instincts, or would you carry on anyway? Your opinion can open doors to reflections that others may not have yet noticed, and this creates a powerful exchange within this community. Furthermore, each comment is like an extra flashlight illuminating this dark path we're exploring together. And if you feel like this content is captivating, that the atmosphere of mystery and investigation speaks directly to you, don't forget to like this video. It may seem like a simple gesture, but it's precisely this that makes the difference in helping the story reach more people who, like you, are interested in cases that blend police action, psychological horror, and real-life enigmas. More than that, if you are not yet officially part of this journey, subscribe to the channel now. Conflict Route here. Each episode is designed to delve deeply into events that not only challenge police logic, but also disturb the mind and leave a mark on the memory of those who follow. Your submission is what keeps this space alive, what strengthens the connection between narrator and audience, and what allows us to continue bringing you stories you won't find anywhere else. So, participate, comment, like, and subscribe, because this isn't just a story being told, it's an experience being built alongside you. And now, with radios tuned, dogs restless, and the echo of the first step inside the tunnel, the operation was officially underway. The scene behind the scenes of that operation seemed to be taken from one of those stories the police themselves prefer not to record in official reports. The K9 officers were accustomed to dealing with pressure, risky chases, and desperate escapes in city alleys. But there was something different that night, a mood that spread through the air like an invisible mist, difficult to explain in words. Those outside, observing from afar, felt this weight without even knowing why. Perhaps it was the biting wind coming from underground. Perhaps it was the feeling that this tunnel was not just concrete and rust, but a portal to something deeper, almost as if it concealed a hidden truth about to be revealed. The sniffer dogs, normally disciplined and confident, displayed strange signs from the start. They weren't barking in the usual way, but instead emitted low growls, interspersed with short howls that sounded more like laments than simple animal communication. Their erect ears betrayed that they were detecting something beyond human capacity. It was pure instinct, the most primitive form of sensing danger, and yet their handlers persisted, trying to calm the animals with firm commands. This uneasiness, however, did not go unnoticed. Many years later, in discreet interviews, colleagues who hadn't participated in the raid said they'd never forgotten the look those dogs gave them before entering the tunnel. A look of warning, of refusal, as if to warn that their journey had a much darker fate than simple capture. Meanwhile, the officers checked their equipment with the precision of those who know that every detail can mean the difference between returning alive or disappearing forever. High-powered flashlights were checked, radios tested repeatedly, weapons adjusted in holsters tightly against their bodies. The metallic sound of safety locks being checked echoed in the silence of the deserted street. There was no nervous laughter, no catchphrases to ease the tension. The silence reigned, heavy, as if everyone already sensed they were about to face something beyond logic. One of the younger agents reported days before his disappearance that he always felt proud when called on K9 missions. For him, it was a testament to his confidence, a testament to his ability to handle situations few others would. But that night, he later admitted to close colleagues, something inside him screamed not to cross that threshold. A mixture of intuition and irrational fear made him wish for a moment he could be assigned to any other post in the city. The disturbing detail is that this same agent never returned. His name still echoes among those who knew him, a cruel reminder that seemingly routine decisions can lead us down paths of no return. The tunnel, in turn, seemed to feed on the group's anxiety. The damp concrete reflected the light from their flashlights in a distorted way, creating elongated shadows that moved with each breath, as if the space had a life of its own. A metallic smell permeated the air, an odor that blended rust, stagnant water, and something more difficult to identify, like burnt ozone, Some describe this sensation as like entering a living labyrinth, where each step seems to narrow the invisible walls around it. It wasn't just claustrophobia, it was as if the environment had been designed to destabilize the human mind. Later testimonies from officers who remained outside are even more intriguing. One swore that, while waiting, he felt time passing strangely. The minutes seemed to drag, and the cold increased for no apparent reason, despite being in the middle of the city. Another claimed to have heard, in the early morning silence, the muffled sound of footsteps that didn't belong to anyone on the team, coming from the darkness beyond the entrance. These perceptions were never officially recorded, but were kept in confidential reports, passed on as veiled warnings to those who dared to recall the mission. All of this cannot be reduced to a simple police report. There is something human, almost spiritual, when we consider the psychological transformation these men and women underwent as they prepared to enter the unknown. It's not just about courage, but about a mindset shaped by years of training that night was challenged to its limit. Animal instinct, the oppressive silence, and the sensation of crossing an invisible line created an atmosphere that bordered on the unbearable. And perhaps this is precisely where the greatest reflection lies. How often, on our own journey, are we also led to enter symbolic tunnels, full of uncertainty, where each step requires decisions that can change everything? It is in this parallel that we realize how stories like these speak not only of the New York Police Department or an operation lost in time, but also about the impact of choices that shape destinies. As the dogs were readied and the formation set, the city seemed to disappear around them. The lights, the sounds, life on the surface, everything was reduced to that entry point where the concrete breathed like a sleeping organism, ready to swallow those who dared invade it. And it was in this moment of preparation, when nothing had yet happened, but everything was already written in the tension of their gazes, that true terror began to take shape. If you've made it this far, just leave a comment saying, "Basement." This way I will know that you are also walking side by side through this labyrinth of mysteries and revelations that are yet to come. The first step into that tunnel was like crossing an invisible border. The noise of the city suddenly vanished, replaced by an almost absolute silence, broken only by the ragged sound of the agent's breathing and the dog's barking, which echoed off the concrete walls, multiplying into a dissonant chorus that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The darkness was dense, not just an absence of light, but a living presence that spread around every corner. The flashlights cast dim beams, unable to reveal what lay beyond a few meters, and every shadow created by the flickering lights seemed to move independently, as if something were watching in the gloom. The K9 dogs advanced first, quickly sniffing the ground, leashes firmly in their handlers' hands. But soon their behavior changed. What had been concentration turned to restlessness. The animals began to back away, growling at nothing, the hairs on their backs standing on end, as if reacting to an invisible presence. What's striking is that it wasn't just one dog in particular, but all of them, at once, as if a single wave of instinct had taken over the group. The sound of their howls reverberated unsettlingly through the tunnel, creating an atmosphere that blended animal fear and human apprehension. The agents, trying to remain calm, transmitted short messages over the radio, reporting progress, coordinates, and impressions, but the signals seemed distorted. Entire sentences were cut off, words were lost in metallic noises, until some communications became completely unintelligible. It was as if the underground itself had swallowed the transmission waves. Those monitoring from outside later reported that it felt like hearing muffled voices behind a thick wall, impossible to understand. And this increased the anguish of those waiting for news. The descent continued, meter by meter, and the air felt increasingly heavy. The metallic smell, described behind the scenes during the preparation, was now intensifying, to the point of making some officers nauseous. Moisture dripped down. The walls and drops fell from the ceiling, creating a rhythmic dripping sound reminiscent of clockwork, a reminder that time within the confines of the track wasn't flowing as it should. It wasn't long before the dogs, once trained to chase to the end, simply refused to advance. They dug their paws into the ground, pulled back on their leashes, and stared into the void ahead, as if seeing something human eyes couldn't grasp. And then what no one could have predicted happened. In a burst of pure panic, the animals broke free, ripping the leashes from their handlers' hands and charging toward the exit. The force was so great that some officers were dragged for meters before letting go completely. The sound of hooves against the concrete, the desperate squeals and the dragging of leashes echoed through the tunnel, leaving those left behind in complete shock. The most distressing detail is that never before had the K9 dogs reacted in such a way, so unanimously, so desperately. The radio began transmitting again, but this time it wasn't just garbled messages. What could be heard were disconnected fragments, muffled screams, a mixture of static and sounds no one could clearly identify. Some swear they heard voices that didn't belong to the team, whispered phrases, as if someone were calling the officers' names. Others say it was nothing more than electrical distortion caused by the depth. But to this day, no expert has been able to satisfactorily explain what happened to the communication at that moment. This was the turning point. From the moment the dogs abandoned their mission, the weight of the silence became unbearable. The tunnel, once a simple chase scenario, became seen as a hostile labyrinth, a space that seemed to manipulate the environment and human senses. The officer's mindset changed at that precise moment. What had been a capture operation became a journey of survival, with every decision fraught with impact and uncertainty. Behind the scenes, agents, who later reviewed the official records, asserted that there was something deeply symbolic about this. When even dogs, creatures guided by the purest instinct, refuse to continue, perhaps it's a sign that the hidden truth of the place exceeds the limits of what the rational mind can bear. The transformation of the mission into an enigma left its mark not only on the incomplete reports, but also on the psychology of those who observed the operation from the outside. And here's a curious detail. Some witnesses claim that after the dogs escaped, the temperature in the tunnel dropped abruptly, as if a cold breeze had permeated the space. Others claim they heard something crawling along the walls, as if they weren't alone inside. None of this has been officially confirmed, but these revelations continue to be repeated in discreet conversations between veteran police officers, like forbidden stories only circulated among those who have faced the city's darkest side. The operation, which should have been just another search among many others, had crossed a line of no return. The radios were failing, the dogs had fled, and the remaining agents had to decide whether to press on or retreat. It was a dilemma between duty and instinct, between discipline and fear. And each step deeper into the tunnel took them deeper, not only into the city's subterranean realm, but into a spiral of mystery that still echoes in the memories of those who dare revisit this story. Leave your word in the comments maze if you also feel that from here on we are not just talking about a physical tunnel, but about something much more disturbing, which still needs to be explored. The silence that gripped the tunnel's outer perimeter was so heavy, it seemed to embody desperation itself. The sirens had quieted, but no one dared relax. What followed the dogs' desperate escape was a shock no training could prepare for. The officers who had entered the darkness never returned. There were no signs of a struggle, no gunshots, no tracks to explain their absence. It was as if the underground had suddenly swallowed every step, every breath, every decision made with such discipline and courage. And the deeper the rescuers tried to penetrate the tunnel, the more surreal this scene became, defying all known logic. Specialized search teams were dispatched immediately, but soon reports of something disturbing began. Each incursion seemed to alter the space, as if the tunnel itself possessed a Consciousness capable of reorganizing itself. Corridors that were previously visible disappeared, forks shifted, and the damp, cold walls seemed to draw closer to those who advanced. Some reported hearing footsteps that belonged to no one, and the echo of distorted voices that seemed to whisper directly into one's mind, as if they knew one's innermost fears. It was a reality where perception and logic blurred, creating an atmosphere that altered the very mindset of those who dared explore the labyrinth. Internal NYPD documents, never officially confirmed, suggest that several officers who participated in the search operations exhibited drastic behavioral changes shortly after the rescue attempt. Some developed severe psychological breakdowns, reporting experiences that went far beyond the simple stress of police work. Figures disappearing before their eyes, incomprehensible sounds echoing through the tunnels, and the constant feeling of being watched by something unseen. Believe it or not, these perceptions became a subject of study among some veterans of the department, who sought to understand the impact the experience had on the team's psyche, recording behind-the-scenes details that have never been made public. And it is at this point that the narrative takes on almost supernatural overtones. Imagine yourself in these agents' shoes. Each step forward is a decision laden with impact. Each turn in the corridor is a choice that can alter everything, and each shadow seems to carry its own intentions. Fear ceases to be merely an emotion. It becomes a guide, a force that manipulates the mind and tests the emotional resilience of those who still retain some control over themselves. The hidden truth of the tunnel is not merely physical. It manifests itself in the form of psychological terror, causing even the most seasoned professionals to question their perceptions, their abilities, and even their memories of what happened. Some reports describe phenomena bordering on the impossible, lanterns that went out without explanation, echoes of footsteps synchronized with one's own breathing, sudden temperature changes that chilled the bone. Every detail seemed to intensify the sensation that the space was not just a tunnel, but a living entity, capable of absorbing energy, manipulating senses, and distorting reality. The combination of instinct, experience, and courage, which would normally form a solid psychological barrier, proved insufficient in the face of what, according to internal documents, many described as a constant, silent presence capable of affecting judgment and inducing profound mental confusion. What happened at that moment goes beyond the record of simple police procedures. The operation, which began as a routine mission with sniffer dogs, transformed into a phenomenon that defies traditional explanations. And yet, the narrative is not limited to a simple disappearance. There is something in the way the tunnel interacts with those who enter that suggests it is not a static space. It responds, alters, testing the perception, courage, and very essence of those who dare to cross it. The decisions made there reverberate in ways that would only be partially understood later, leaving an invisible mark on the survivors and a deep shadow in the memories of those who never entered but follow the story. Over the years, NYPD veterans who experienced these classified events speak of a lasting psychological impact, as if the disappearance of those officers triggered a silent transformation, not only within the department, but also in the way missions in extreme environments are approached. The mindset of those who have participated in high-risk operations has changed, and the account of that night has become a benchmark for understanding how the unknown can profoundly affect decisions and reactions, even among the most prepared. The impact of this disappearance is not limited to the physical. It extends to the mind, to the background of the investigation, and to the understanding of what we call risk. The journey of these officers, which should have been recorded as just another routine mission, remains shrouded in an aura of mystery, disturbing the perception of reality and leaving clues that some places, some forgotten corridors, hold truths that should not be uncovered. Each subsequent investigation reinforced this feeling, revealing that the darkness underground is not simply the absence of light, but the presence of enigmas that test the courage and rationality of any human being to the limit. If you're feeling the tension building, just write the word in the comments "echo," as if tuning in to those distorted sounds and whispers that continue to haunt the forgotten halls. The silence that followed the last communication from underground was absolute, but not in the usual sense of the word. It was a heavy silence, one that accumulated on the concrete walls and reverberated in the minds of everyone outside. The vehicle sirens had ceased, but nothing brought any comfort. No bodies were found, no concrete clues pointed to the location of the missing officers, and the K9 unit dogs, once exemplars of discipline and courage, now became silent symbols of the horror experienced that night. Every hesitant bark, every instinctive recoil, every lost look seemed to carry memories of something humans couldn't comprehend, and that not even the most rigorous training could prepare for. The official reports were brief, almost minimalist, describing only the obvious. The officers did not return. But behind the scenes, among those dedicated to studying the operation, revelations emerged that never reached the public eye. Internal documents, classified files that escape destruction or archiving, suggest phenomena bordering on the inexplicable. Sounds impossible to identify, abrupt temperature changes, shadows that seem to move against the logic of physics, echoes of footsteps that did not correspond to anyone present. Interpretations of these signals varied, but one thing was unanimous. Something in that underground structure transcends common understanding, defying rationality and human perception. Rumors began to circulate about the tunnel's closure. Some claim the site was quickly sealed with concrete and metal grates, as if the department itself had decided that some doors should remain closed, hiding the truth. However, independent investigators who dared to approach in the following months reported phenomena that defied any practical explanation. Distant sounds, such as shuffling footsteps, echoes of almost human voices, and subtle vibrations could still be heard at certain points on the surface. Some described the sensation that those who had entered were still present, as if they had become part of a kind of subterranean echo, a non-physical but impactful manifestation that remained connected to the tunnel's structure. What makes this story especially disturbing is that there is no traditional resolution, no clear conclusion that allows the events to be organized into a logical narrative. Every operation that began as a routine police operation has become a mystery that defies comprehension. Every detail, from the dogs that fled in terror to the reports of whispered voices, forms a sequence of revelations that subverts any expectation of clarity or certainty. The human mind, accustomed to finding patterns, suddenly finds itself faced with an enigma that resists rational interpretation. NYPD veterans who were exposed to internal reports and held discreet discussions about the case emphasized that the psychological impact of this operation was profound and lasting, not only on the officers directly involved, but on the entire mindset of those working in underground or high-risk missions. There is a silent, almost imperceptible transformation that occurs when we confront the unknown in its rawest form. Decisions that once seemed simple begin to carry invisible consequences, and our perception of reality becomes flexible, vulnerable to subjective interpretations that can completely alter our understanding of what is safe or possible. And it's precisely this intersection of police action, psychological terror, and mystery that makes the story of the K9 unit so fascinating. The New York Underground, which should be merely a physical space, becomes a stage for borderline experiences where every footstep, every noise, and every shadow directly impacts the courage, perception, and sanity of those who dare to explore it. It's a true journey of discovery, not only about the disappearance of the officers, but about the limits of human experience in the face of the unknown. The fascination that arises from this narrative is linked to what cannot be explained, to the hidden truth that resists formal reports and attempts at investigation. The sense of incompleteness and mystery provokes a profound unease, leading anyone who approaches the story to question not only the events, but also their own perceptions, their very understanding of risk and reality. With each new analysis or testimony, nuances emerge that expand the enigma, making the K9 unit operation not just a disappearance case, but a reflection on the effects of confronting the unknown directly and inevitably. Over the years, the narrative has been perpetuated through secret archives, veteran accounts, and rumors from independent investigators, always maintaining the aura of mystery surrounding the abandoned corridors beneath the city. For many, the operation has become a symbol of what lies beyond logic, a story that blends courage, instinct, error, and that which should not be awakened. Every step taken underground, every bark, every shadow contributes to the construction of an enigma that continues to defy human comprehension. If you feel like you're starting to realize the magnitude of what happened in that tunnel, write the word in the comments "eco-subterranean" as a way to connect with the restlessness and mysteries that still remain there, waiting to be explored further. If you've made it this far, it means you've been able to dive headfirst into this story and follow every detail of this operation that defies logic and instinct. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you to leave a comment with your thoughts. I went underground as a record that you were along on this journey, felt the tension, and reflected on the mysteries that still linger over the K9 unit. Each comment is a way for us to understand how this narrative connects people who share a curiosity for the unknown. And, of course, if you felt this behind-the-scenes look at the operation and the psychological terror that unfolded resonated with you, please leave a like. It's not just a gesture, it's a sign that stories like this have value, that they're worth exploring and telling with care, maintaining the intensity, mystery, and respect for the experience of those involved. If you want to continue following this type of content and discover more cases that mix police action, mystery, and behind the scenes that few know about, subscribe to the channel Conflict Route. The idea here is to take you inside these operations, show you the details that often go unnoticed, provoke reflection, and of course, keep your curiosity alive. And there's a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there, because the story we started to explore today still holds many layers of mystery that deserve to be unraveled.